Welcome to World at Work TV. I'm Allison Avalos, and I'm joined today by Angela Berg and David Slavney of Mercer, and we're talking about the use of personas in effective HR strategy planning. David, first talk about what you mean by a persona.
So a persona is really a set of characteristics, interests. We really think about personas as being a multi-dimensional look at a set of characteristics, interests, demographics, desires, needs. So it's thinking a little bit about how people really are put together and thinking about that whole person in that description of a persona.
So Angela, how can you utilize that in your design of your total rewards mix?
Once you start to develop personas in your organization, you start to realize that there are multiple subgroups within the population, and that each of them have very specific and unique needs, whether it's in terms of financial, wealth, health, careers, whatever the case may be. And as an employer, you can start to look at each of those different segments and figure out what are the best benefits, tools, resources that are relevant to that group and that would be most useful for that group in terms of improving their health, improving their wealth, and navigating their careers. So it ultimately leads to a segmented approach for your total rewards, which increases engagement, and it also is a better spend for you if you know exactly how to target and focus your total rewards resources.
Are organizations equipped to build personas with where we are today? There's a lot of conversation about big data and everybody's got a lot of access to information. Is this the kind of information that organizations already have and know about their employees, or are there some steps to pulling that together?
Organizations have tons of data, you're right, and so that is the starting point for persona development. We actually use cluster analysis, which is a very tried and true marketing technique using statistical analysis to find those subgroups. So yes, organizations have the data. Some organizations choose to get additional data from some of their third-party providers and bring that into the mix. They absolutely have it. Some organizations might even have the right people within your organization to do that cluster analysis. So we think that yes, organizations are equipped, absolutely.
Is there an ideal number of personas for a given organization size? You
could certainly create many personas, but I think it becomes unwieldy. And so what we're finding is, 5 to 7 is about the right number. It's enough division that there is a significant difference between the personas that you can manage. But also you can manage the number. If you start managing 30 personas, it would be impossible. So we're really finding that to be a pretty good number to start with, and we've had organizations start with a lot more than that, but really sort of cull it down to that sort of totals.
So now let's talk about using those personas. How does that help shape your communications with employees?
So one of the things that is interesting about how we use personas and thinking about it is sort of moving from a very homogeneous communications approach, which is what most organizations use because it's simple and straightforward, to how do we actually make information meaningful and relevant to the different personas. And so that communication strategy begins to say, how do we think about each persona, what their desires are, what's their communication style, what's their needs, and how do we structure content and presentation so that in fact we're making content relevant and meaningful to them. That should improve and does improve engagement, but it's a very different way of sort of thinking about the organization and the way we approach them in smaller chunks, but chunks that in fact prove to be more engaging than homogeneous effects.
So how does this method benefit organizations and its employees?
We can see some really direct benefit from it. When we first sit down to work with an organization on this, the first thing we say is, what are you trying to accomplish? What are your objectives? And for a lot of organizations, it's that our employees aren't engaged and they're not using the resources, programs, benefits, maximizing them that are already available. So for a lot of organizations, the immediate success measure of this approach is, are we driving more people to actually take action? And if they can measure that, which we can, they feel that right there they've got some success. But I think the broader piece of it is that once you're linking employees with the resources that are relevant to their situation, you're helping improve their life. And that may sound a little cliche, but we've actually been in focus groups with employees of organizations where we're doing this, and to hear the employees talk about, I learned about this benefit or resource that I didn't know about, and here's the way that it really helped me improve my life. These people are more engaged, they're more productive, and they're getting control of those financial and health issues that they wouldn't otherwise. So the benefits are very direct. And again, if you're looking at participation in programs as a measure, it's something that you can definitely see an immediate impact and ROI from.
The other thing to think about is, to the extent that engagement and that appreciation adds to the value proposition of the organization, it's actually a way to actually differentiate what you provide, even though the programs may not be all that significantly different. And so appreciation has to come from people experiencing it and getting value from those programs. And so it's an opportunity for organizations to get the maximum of those output and the maximum leverage on those programs than just leaving them there and having very low participation rates.
In recent years, there's been more and more conversation about customizing your program design as well as the communication, and I think a lot of it is centered a little bit more on generational differences. So it sounds to me like this is a step up from there. And you talked about, Angela, the data being available. Are there different benefits, though, in terms of looking at this by persona versus generation?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. We actually have a really strong point of view on this, and it's really interesting because the whole discussion about generational communication started when the millennials started to hit the workforce, and organizations tended to look at millennials as this massive block of homogeny, but we actually know, even within that population, if you look at the U.S. Department of Labor statistics, they're hugely diverse, whether it's ethnicity, education, income, just they're really diverse, and so this concept that we could even speak to that generation in an effective voice is kind of ridiculous when you look at it. So we started to realize that it's not just the millennials that are different. Even the baby boomer population, we might say they're nearing retirement, we need to think about retirement for them. But things like the recession happened. There's a lot of baby boomers who aren't anywhere near retirement. They're practically starting over. And so this is actually what got us a couple years ago thinking about personas, is simply that we don't know where people are at. You can't make assumptions based on their age, and that by doing the analysis, really looking at the data, we can get a much better sense of where do people group and what is it that they need to help them, and letting employees self-select that. That's part of the persona, is you're not pushing a persona out to someone, you're saying, here's an array of personas for your organization, choose the one that best meets your needs. And people sometimes end up in places that surprise us, but that's great because they're getting to what's relevant to them.
One of the things about personas that sort of drives you to that is, again, not making those assumptions, but letting the consumer, in this case, the employee, make a choice about what's important to them, rather than you as the organization assuming what's important based on even the generational ones. But the idea here is that generations don't drive needs. Needs, in fact, are very diverse, even within the generational population. So, our analogy is that, when you've met one 55-year-old, you've only met one 55-year-old and one 35-year-old and one millennial. So thinking about that in a different way, I think encourages engagement, but it also gives people the opportunity to say, you know what, don't tell me what I should know. Here's the things that are really important to me.
What advice would each of you have for HR professionals who are looking to pursue personas in their organizations?
First of all, look at your data. Take advantage of that data. And before you start the cluster analysis, really think about, what am I trying to accomplish in the organization? What are our goals? What are we trying to improve or impact? And then do your cluster analysis around that. I mean, it's fascinating to do it, but at the end of the day, so what if you haven't linked it with a set of objectives and a place that you want to go? And I think that combining those two is a really powerful approach to this.
The other thing is, and we've talked about this with lots of clients, is let it be okay to sort of iterate and perfect these. So you're never going to come out of the box perfect. The population's changing. You may have made some assumptions that are incorrect. So actually work and think about the idea of piloting, iterating, to perfect the personas, to perfect what you know and what people want from those personas. And that is, in fact, something that's quite unique in a lot of HR programs. People sort of want to make sure that they've got it and spend a lot of time and effort making sure they hit the home run. But the idea here is to actually start, try something, get results, and then move on to the next version and get that version better and better. And part of the analysis and part of some of the communication you do, you can in fact get that data to help you move to the next step.
Yeah, and take some risk. That's the other. This is a new approach to thinking about your total rewards program as well as communication. You're segmenting in a really bold way, and for some organizations that initially feels uncomfortable because you're essentially curating sets of benefits for different subgroups of the population and giving them different messages about relevancy. It can be a little scary, but take some risk and be confident that you're helping your employees and their families get where they need to be. And if you're willing to do that, there's a big payoff.
Thank you both.
Thank you.
For World at Work TV, I'm Allison Avalos.